A great white shark moves through the cold water off South Africa. It is more than a ton of muscle, teeth, and instinct. For millions of years, this animal has hunted almost anything that crossed its path. But this time, it is not the hunter. Two orcas are moving in. One stays in front of the shark, forcing it to focus on the obvious threat. The second one disappears below, where the shark cannot easily see it coming. Then everything happens at once. The orca slams into the shark's side and rolls it onto its back. Almost immediately, the great white stops fighting. Its body goes stiff. Its jaws hang open. The animal that can tear through a seal in seconds suddenly looks completely helpless. For years, scenes like this have shaped the way people see this matchup. Orcas are the smarter hunters. They work together. They know exactly where to strike. The great white, meanwhile, looks like a victim that never had a real chance. But that is not the full story. Marine researchers have found great white sharks still swimming with deep, evenly spaced scars along their bodies. The marks look like they came from orca teeth. Some have damaged fins. Others carry long wounds across their sides. Yet they survived. They escaped an animal that was supposed to overpower them with almost no effort. So how did they get away? If great whites are truly helpless against orcas, why are there living sharks carrying the evidence of those attacks? The answer is more complicated than a simple fight between a stronger predator and a weaker one. A great white cannot match a pod of orcas in a direct battle. It usually cannot outrun them either. But it still has ways to survive. It can sense danger before the attack begins. It can use the depth of the ocean as an escape route. And when there is nowhere left to run, it can become violent, unpredictable, and dangerous enough to make even an orca reconsider the hunt. But before we can understand how a great white fights back, we need to understand what the orcas are really after. They are not hunting the entire shark. They want one specific organ, and that organ is valuable enough to turn one of the ocean's most feared predators into prey. For a long time, the waters around Gansby and False Bay in South Africa were known as one of the best places in the world to find great white sharks. If you wanted to see the ocean's top predator, this was where you went. Then something changed. Around 2017, large great white sharks started washing up on the beaches. At first, it looked like another sad but natural event. Sharks die. That happens. But when scientists got a closer look, they realized these deaths were anything but normal. The bodies were almost untouched. The sharks hadn't been ripped apart. They hadn't been eaten from head to tail. In fact, most of the meat was still there. Only one thing was missing: their livers. Even stranger, every shark had nearly the same wound. A clean opening on the lower belly, right between the pectoral fins. It wasn't messy. It wasn't random. Whoever did this knew exactly where to cut and exactly what they wanted. That was the part that really caught everyone's attention. This didn't look like a feeding frenzy. It looked planned. Researchers began looking for a predator that was strong enough to kill a great white, smart enough to target a single organ, and precise enough to leave almost everything else behind. Again and again, the evidence pointed to the same two animals, a pair of adult male orcas known as port and starboard. These two whales were seen in the same area where the sharks disappeared. Not long after, more shark carcasses began showing up with the exact same pattern. The connection became harder and harder to ignore. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. Port and starboard aren't just bigger predators that happen to hunt sharks. What makes them different isn't only their size or strength, it's what they've learned. Because the way they hunt isn't random. It's a skill that's been passed down, refined over time, and used with incredible precision. Here's something a lot of people don't realize. Not all orcas hunt the same way. Even though they're the same species, different groups have completely different diets. It's almost like each family has its own traditions, passed from one generation to the next. Some pods spend their lives chasing salmon. Others specialize in seals. Some go after dolphins or even large whales. And then there are a few that have learned something very different. They hunt sharks. That's exactly what makes port and starboard so unusual. These two orcas didn't stumble across this hunting style by accident. They know exactly what they're doing, and they've done it over and over again. One of the clearest examples came in 2023. Researchers documented an attack where 17 broad-nosed seven-gill sharks were killed in a single day. When the carcasses were examined, the pattern looked strangely familiar. The bodies were still there. Most of the meat hadn't been touched, but every single shark was missing its liver. That tells us something important. This isn't random feeding. It's not an animal biting whatever it can reach. It's a predator making a very specific choice. The goal isn't to eat the whole shark. The goal is to remove one organ as quickly as possible and move on. That kind of precision doesn't happen by luck. It comes from experience, from learning, and from repeating the same successful strategy over and over. When you look at it that way, these attacks become even more impressive. The sharks aren't being killed because the orcas are wasting energy in a long fight. They're being killed because the orcas already know exactly where the most valuable reward is. They don't need the entire body. They only take the part that's worth the most. And that raises an even bigger question. If a great white shark weighs well over a ton, why would an orca ignore almost all of that meat just to take one single organ? So why would an orca ignore almost an entire shark just to take one organ? The answer comes down to simple biology. Unlike most bony fish, sharks don't have a swim bladder to help them stay afloat. Instead, they rely on something much bigger: their liver. A great white's liver is enormous. It stretches through much of the body and can make up a huge part of the shark's total weight. But size isn't what makes it valuable. What's inside is. The liver is packed with oil, especially a compound called squalene. That oil helps the shark stay buoyant without constantly burning extra energy. For the shark, it's a survival tool. For an orca, it's one of the richest food sources in the ocean. Think about what an orca has to do every single day. It's a warm-blooded mammal living in cold water. It has to keep its body warm. It has to swim long distances. It has to chase powerful prey. All of that burns an incredible amount of energy. So, when an orca finds a meal that's loaded with high-energy fats, it doesn't need to waste time eating everything else. The liver gives it exactly what it's looking for: maximum calories, minimum effort. That's why these attacks look so unusual. The orcas aren't feeding randomly. They're making a calculated decision. Instead of spending time tearing apart an entire shark, they take the one part that gives them the biggest payoff and leave the rest behind. When you look at it this way, it starts to make perfect sense. This isn't about cruelty. It's about efficiency. Every hunt costs energy. The less energy an orca spends getting the most valuable reward, the better its chances of surviving and hunting again. But knowing what you want is only half the battle. Actually getting that liver means going up against one of the most dangerous predators on Earth. A great white may be smaller than an orca, but it's still armed with hundreds of razor-sharp teeth and a bite that can cause devastating injuries. So the next question is obvious. How does an orca get close enough to remove the liver without becoming the one that gets seriously hurt? At first glance, this doesn't seem like a fair fight. A great white shark is one of the most powerful predators on the planet. But when it's facing a full-grown male orca, the numbers tell a different story. A really big great white is an impressive animal, but an adult male orca is usually much larger. It's longer, it's heavier, and when something that massive hits at full speed, the force is unbelievable. A direct collision isn't just painful. It can seriously damage the shark before the real attack even begins. The shark has another disadvantage too. Its skeleton isn't made of hard bone like ours. It's made of cartilage. That makes it lighter and more flexible. But it also means it isn't built to absorb the same kind of impact as a much heavier animal crashing into it. Still, size alone isn't what gives the orca the upper hand. The real advantage is how it hunts. Orcas don't rush in without a plan. They communicate. They work together. One animal distracts the shark while another moves into position from a completely different angle. Instead of forcing a long fight, they create confusion and take away the shark's chance to react. The great white has incredible senses of its own. Around its snout are tiny sensory organs that can detect the electrical signals produced by living animals. Even in dark water, that system helps the shark locate prey with amazing accuracy. But there's a problem. That ability works best when the shark is tracking a target. It becomes much less useful when several predators are attacking from different directions at the same time. The orca also has another advantage. It uses sound to build a detailed picture of what's happening around it. While the shark is trying to react to one threat, the second orca may already be in the perfect position to strike. That's why these hunts often look so one-sided. It's not because the shark is weak. It's because it's being forced into a fight where almost every advantage belongs to its opponent. And here's the most important part. The orcas don't need to overpower the shark in a long, exhausting battle. They only need to trigger one weakness in the shark's nervous system. Once that happens, the entire fight changes in just a few seconds. This is where things get really interesting. Most people think an orca wins because it's bigger or stronger, but that's only part of the story. What really makes these hunts so effective is the strategy. The attack usually starts with teamwork. One orca moves in from the front. Its job isn't to make the kill. It's there to grab the shark's attention and keep its focus in one direction. While the shark is watching that threat, the second orca quietly moves into position. Instead of attacking head-on, it comes in from below or from the side, where the shark is far less prepared. Then comes the move that changes everything. The orca drives its body into the shark and flips it upside down. It sounds simple, but for a great white, it's a huge problem. When the shark is suddenly rolled onto its back, its nervous system can go into a state called tonic immobility. Almost instantly, the shark stops responding. Its body becomes stiff, its jaws relax. For a short time, it can't fight the way it normally would. And that's exactly what the orca is waiting for. There's another problem too. Great white sharks need to keep moving so water can flow over their gills. That's how they get oxygen. Once the shark is upside down and unable to swim normally, that process is disrupted. The longer it stays trapped in that position, the worse things become. Now, the orca has all the time it needs. Instead of getting into a dangerous fight with a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth, it can move straight to the shark's underside, make a precise opening, remove the liver, and leave. Suddenly, those famous videos make a lot more sense. It isn't that the shark chooses not to fight. In many cases, it never gets the chance. Its strongest weapon is taken away before the real battle even begins. But no hunting strategy is perfect. Everything depends on that first move going exactly as planned. Because if the shark isn't flipped over, if it stays in control, then the entire hunt can turn into something much more violent, unpredictable, and dangerous for the orcas. If every encounter between an orca and a great white ended the same way, we'd expect one thing: the shark dies, end of story. But that's not what scientists found. Back in South Africa, researchers photographed an 11-foot female great white that looked completely healthy. She was swimming normally. She was still hunting. She was doing everything a great white is supposed to do. Then they looked closer. Running across her side were several deep, parallel scars. At first, some people thought they came from a boat propeller, but when experts measured the spacing between those marks, the pattern told a different story. It matched the teeth of an orca. That meant this shark had already survived something most people believed was almost impossible. She had been caught, and somehow, she got away. Then another case appeared, this time in New Zealand. Researchers documented a large male great white with a badly damaged dorsal fin. The injury wasn't caused by another shark. According to the evidence presented in the transcript, it was consistent with a failed attack by an orca. The bite landed, but it didn't hold. The shark escaped, even though it lost part of its fin in the process. These cases change the way we look at the entire story. They remind us that orcas don't win every hunt, and great whites aren't simply helpless victims waiting for their turn. If the shark avoids being flipped onto its back, everything changes. It can thrash with incredible force. It can twist its entire body. It can rip itself free, even if that means leaving behind flesh or part of a fin. For the shark, that's a price worth paying. Because losing a piece of your body is a lot better than losing your life. But surviving an attack like that takes more than instinct. It takes a body built to absorb punishment that would kill most other animals. And that's where one of the great white's most impressive advantages begins to show. Getting away from an orca's first bite is only part of the battle. The real question is this: how does a great white survive injuries that would probably kill most other animals? The answer starts with its skin. A great white isn't covered in smooth scales like most fish. Its entire body is protected by millions of tiny, tooth-like structures called dermal denticles. Together, they create a rough, armor-like surface that's incredibly tough. There's a reason evolution built the shark this way. Great white sharks don't have gentle mating behavior. During mating, males often bite the females along the fins and sides to hold their position. Over time, especially in large adult females, the skin becomes remarkably thick and durable because it has to withstand those powerful bites. That same natural armor becomes a huge advantage when another predator attacks. It's hard to grip, it's hard to tear, and it's even harder to hold onto when the shark starts fighting back. Now imagine trying to control an animal that weighs more than 2 tons. The moment the shark realizes it still has a chance, it throws everything into escaping. Its entire body twists. Its tail explodes with power. It thrashes so violently that holding onto it becomes incredibly difficult. If an orca loses its grip for even a second, that might be all the shark needs. It doesn't have to win the fight. It only needs one opening, and the shark is surprisingly good at surviving the damage. According to the transcript, scientists found that great whites have genetic traits linked to rapid wound healing and protection against severe blood clot. That helps explain why sharks with massive bite wounds have later been seen swimming, hunting, and living normal lives. Sometimes they lose part of a fin. Sometimes they leave behind a piece of flesh. But compared to losing their life, that's a trade they're built to make. That's what makes these sharks so remarkable. They don't survive because they're impossible to injure. They survive because they're incredibly difficult to finish. Still, escaping that first attack doesn't mean the danger is over. An orca is still faster. And if it decides to keep chasing, the great white needs an entirely different plan to stay alive. One of the smartest survival strategies doesn't happen during the attack. It happens long before the attack ever begins. Great white sharks don't wait until an orca is right in front of them. If they can avoid the fight altogether, that's exactly what they'll do. The ocean gives them clues. When an orca kills a shark, huge amounts of blood and oil from the liver spread through the water. Those chemicals don't just disappear, they travel with the current. At the same time, the orcas are constantly communicating with each other through clicks and calls as they move through the area. To another great white, those signals mean one thing: danger. Researchers studying sharks off South Africa noticed something remarkable. The moment orcas appeared, great whites started leaving. Not just one or two. Entire groups disappeared from some of their favorite hunting grounds. These were places packed with seals, where sharks could easily find food. And yet they still abandoned them. Some didn't come back for weeks. Others stayed away even longer. That tells you something important. For a great white, survival always comes before the next meal. Running away may look like fear, but from the shark's point of view, it's probably the smartest decision it can make. What's even more interesting is what happens after the great whites leave. The ecosystem starts to change almost immediately. Smaller sharks move into the area to take advantage of the food that's suddenly available. But they also become the next target. With the great whites gone, the orcas simply switch to easier prey. It's a reminder that one pair of predators can reshape the behavior of an entire marine community without attacking every animal in the area. That's how powerful their presence is. But early warnings don't always come in time. Sometimes an orca appears too close. Sometimes the chase has already begun. And when escape across the surface isn't enough, the great white turns to one strategy that few animals can follow. It doesn't swim away. It disappears straight into the darkness below. Once an orca starts chasing a great white, running across the surface usually isn't the answer. The orca is faster. It has incredible endurance. In a straight chase, the shark is already at a disadvantage. So instead of trying to outrun its predator, the great white changes the game. It doesn't keep swimming forward. It dives straight down. That might sound like a desperate move, but it's actually one of the smartest survival strategies the shark has. A great white isn't built like most fish. It doesn't have an air-filled swim bladder. That means it doesn't have to worry about rapid pressure changes the way many other fish do. As it drops deeper into the ocean, its body keeps working almost exactly the way it should. The deeper it goes, the more the chase starts to favor the shark instead of the orca. The orca may be an incredible hunter, but it's still a mammal. It has lungs. It has to breathe air. Every second spent chasing prey burns through the oxygen it's carrying. The deeper it dives, the harder that chase becomes. At some point, it has no choice. It has to turn around and head back to the surface. According to the tracking data described in the transcript, this is exactly what researchers have seen. When great whites are cornered, some don't keep running across the ocean. They drop hundreds of meters almost immediately. Some even dive much deeper, far beyond the depth where an orca can safely continue the pursuit. The shark isn't winning the fight. It's changing the battlefield. Instead of trying to beat the orca at speed or strength, it uses the one advantage the orca can't match for very long: depth. Down there, the rules are different. The farther the shark goes, the more expensive the chase becomes for its predator. Eventually, survival isn't decided by who is stronger. It's decided by who reaches their biological limit first. And in deep water, that's often the orca. But this escape plan only works if the ocean is deep enough. If the attack happens near the coast, over a shallow reef, or inside a bay where there's nowhere to dive, the great white loses its best escape route. And that's when the fight changes completely. Everything we've talked about so far depends on one thing. The shark has room to escape. It can leave the area. It can dive into deep water. It can avoid a fight. It knows it probably won't win. But what if none of those options exist? Imagine the attack happens in shallow water. The shoreline blocks one direction. The orcas block the other. There's no deep ocean below, and there's no way the shark can outrun them. At that point, something changes. The great white has no choice but to turn around. This isn't because it suddenly believes it can defeat the orcas. It's because survival leaves it with only one option: fight. And when a great white fights for its life, it's an animal no predator wants to underestimate. Its jaws are built to crush and tear through thick flesh. Its mouth is lined with rows of razor-sharp serrated teeth. As it attacks, it throws its entire body into every bite, snapping its head from side to side with explosive force. At the same time, the shark rolls its eyes backward, protecting them from injury while relying on its other senses to keep tracking what's around it. Nothing about its movements is calm or predictable. It twists, it surges, it lashes out from impossible angles. For an orca, that's a dangerous situation. Even if the pod is likely to win in the end, every second of close contact increases the chance that one animal could suffer a serious injury. And in the wild, that's a risk that matters. A deep wound doesn't just hurt. It can make hunting harder for weeks. It can become infected. It can even threaten the animal's survival if it can't keep feeding itself or its family. That's why intelligence becomes just as important as strength. Orcas don't fight to prove they're fearless. They hunt to survive. If a meal suddenly becomes too risky, walking away can be the smartest decision they make. So the great white doesn't have to kill an orca to survive. It only has to make the cost of the hunt higher than the reward. That isn't a clear victory. But nature doesn't keep score the way people do. Out there, survival is the only result that really matters. After looking at everything, I don't think the great white rules the ocean because it wins every fight. It doesn't. When a coordinated pod of orcas shows up, the odds usually shift in the orcas' favor. They're bigger. They work together. They know exactly how to take advantage of one of the shark's biggest weaknesses. But that doesn't make the great white a helpless victim. What makes this animal so impressive isn't that it always fights. It's that it knows when not to. If it senses danger early, it leaves. If an orca starts chasing it in deep water, it dives into the darkness, where the chase becomes much harder. If it gets bitten but stays in control, it fights with everything it has to break free. And if there's absolutely nowhere left to escape, it turns around and makes the attack so dangerous that even an orca has to think twice. To me, that's the real lesson here. Nature isn't about proving who's tougher. It's about making the right decision at the right time. The orca survives because it doesn't take unnecessary risks. It chooses battles that are worth the effort. The great white survives because it doesn't confuse pride with survival. Sometimes it fights. Sometimes it disappears into the deep. Neither choice is weakness. Both are part of the same strategy that has allowed this ancient predator to survive millions of years of change while countless other giants disappeared. Maybe that's the biggest surprise in this entire story. The greatest predators aren't the ones that refuse to back down. They're the ones that know exactly when to attack, when to walk away, and when simply staying alive is the greatest victory of all. Now I'd love to hear what you think. If a fully grown great white and a single adult orca were trapped in shallow water with no pod, no deep escape, and no outside help, which one do you think would force the other to back off? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy exploring the science behind Earth's most incredible predators, make sure to subscribe to Predator Archives. We'll keep uncovering the real stories behind the animals that continue to shape our planet's oceans.